Have you ever seen a fish tank in a ceiling? Me neither. So now that Brad's come up with that crazy idea, I need to see if it's even possible. I've decided to put the fish tank here. I've come upstairs and calculated that that actually works out to here. I actually think Phil's going to pull this off. I have no idea how Brad ropes me into these jobs.
Before we even take this job on, we need to remove the cupboard door and get the flooring removed to expose the floorboards so we can lift those up and have a look at what we're working with. Luckily for us, these have already been up, so it was an easy job to do. We just grabbed them and pulled them up. They hadn't been fixed down properly prior. Once they were up, we could take a proper look. It was a bit dusty, so we got that cleaned. And then it was time to measure the space we had.
So we've removed all the carpet and the floorboards. And as you can see, we've got a few obstacles. So we've measured where we want our tank and the size we can have in this space. All we need to do now is isolate the electrics and get those removed. And then remove this centre floor joist. Our next job is to try and get the fish tank as central as we can in this gap. And to do that, we've actually cut a little tiny hole using a multi-tool, and we're going to use that as a datum point. So as you can see, I've got a hole here. I'm going to use this as my reference point, and I'm going to measure across either side, but I'm going to just use one side as the central point of the hallway ceiling. Phil, you got the measurements? Phil? It's 400,915. So now we've got our reference and the measurements that Brad's just took. We can work out the centre of the ceiling downstairs, but we can work that out from up here. And then we can mark ourselves the centre line, and then we can work off of that to mark out for our tank.
This we took our time with because it needs to be accurate. We are working with the floor of your house here, so we did a few measurements, made double sure. Once we'd marked it, we used the laser level, and what that did is give us a square line, because obviously when we're cutting this, it needs to be perfectly square for our tank. Once we had our marks, we used a combination square to mark around the joist that we're going to be removing, and that's to make sure that our cut is perfect when we do it, because we don't want any gaps in our floor joists.
So now that we've marked everything out and we're happy with the size of the tank we want, we've contacted Ian over at Aquariums for Life, and he's actually decided he's going to help out with this crazy project. So he's going to get on and make our custom tank.
So after getting over the shock of us explaining we wanted to put a tank in a ceiling, Ian took on a challenge. So with the measurements, he got to work building this amazing custom tank, and what a process this is. If you've never seen anything like this, like I haven't, it's just fantastic to watch. So he got on with cutting all the glass to size, sticking it all together, and then obviously sanding all those edges and cutting in any holes that we needed in the panels for the tank. It was then on to the panel that separates the filtration system from the tank itself. So the filtration's part of the tank, but you can't see it from below, which will all come clear later on in the video. But the first thing we needed was the steel frame.
So we've just received our custom made solid frame from Ian, and this is going to be the thing that holds up that heavy tank.
So now it was time to get down to business. So we needed to prop our ceiling from below, because obviously we're going to be cutting floor joists. So we needed to prop around that area to make sure that we didn't cause any damage while removing that section of floor joist. So we put one either side on the piece that we was removing downstairs, and then that little piece of timber on top is to spread the weight across the beams closest to it. And we did that on both sides of the opening we was creating.
Right, everything is braced up and ready to go. And now I've got Mr. Ryan Davis here,
because apparently I need to fit some sockets because what are we fitting?
It's a fish tank
A fish tank in the ceiling.
And there's no apparently about it. It's going to happen.
Is it?
Yeah, oh yeah. So after convincing yet another person that we really are putting a fish tank in a ceiling, he got on with installing some double sockets, and these are for the pump, heater and lights that we need in the tank. So luckily for us, we had a socket on the opposite side of the wall, so Davis split into the ring main to add another one, and then he done a little spur off of that. So here he is, just putting surface mounted boxes in, because we wasn't really bothered about them looking too fancy. They're in a cupboard and no one's going to see them. So he got that sleeved up, wired in and ready to go, before chucking his tester on and making sure he had done a good job, which I knew he had. He's really good at it. It was then time to see if all of that bracing we had done was up to the task. So using a spare piece of timber that we was going to use to brace the rest, we marked out a second lot of marks because I'd already marked the wrong set in front, and then it was time to start cutting it out. So we decided a multi-tool was going to be the easiest method, and because this is old dry timber, it went through an absolute breeze. And don't forget to cut those screws coming through the plasterboard because we don't want to damage too much of the ceiling. And then with a little bit of a struggle, because it was absolutely wedged in there, we got that piece of timber removed, and the house didn't even fall apart. So it turns out we'd braced it properly. So then it was time to clean up the mess we had created. It's always best to keep your work area tidy. And then we test fitted that metal frame to make sure that everything was going to fit, and it did. So I took some measurements for Brad to cut us some new timber to replace what we had just cut out. So Brad did a bit of work in this, which is pretty amazing if you ask me. So before he come back with the timber, I started to get our hangers in, because that is what's going to take the weight of that joist that we've just cut out. So the nails that we're putting in here are called twist nails, and they're designed to go in but not come back out. Believe me, I've had to remove them. They're a nightmare. So we had 4 of these installed. We originally was going to put 2 on the joist that we had cut, but the problem was we couldn't get access to it. So we decided, instead of using the hangers, we'd use timber locks, which are plenty strong and will hold it all up. Before we got those in though, we needed to add some more of those twist nails to the side of the new timber we had added in. And what that does is lock them into the hangers so they can't move around. So a bit of a slow process, because you do need to fill up every single hole with these nails. It's super important. It's what's going to give it that strength. But once I was in, we could get those fixing in. Right, that's our hole created, or a space. So now we can get this frame inserted inside. Hopefully it fits. Should be a bit of a tight fit, that's for sure. Oh, a bit too tight. Got a nail there, I need to sink a little bit more. Like a glove. So now that we've got the frame into position, we need to fix it into the timbers that we've installed, and also the existing timbers. And we're going to be using some 5mm screws, which is the thickness, and have been countersunk and drilled already for us. The only thing that we have got to do is, as we're screwing it in, we're going to pack any little gaps that we've got, because we don't want to stretch and deform the frame. So let's get these in. Right, that's our frame packed out and all our fixings are in. So now we can get that ceiling cut out. But before we do, we're not cutting around the whole edge. We've come in 115mm off of here, because we're going to be hiding all the filtration system in that little section there. So you won't see it from downstairs. So once we had cleaned up the mess we had made for visual effect, it was time to start putting the carpet back and trimming it down roughly. We didn't do the final trim, we just got it rough, ready for the tank. And then we went downstairs and decided, I think the ceiling's going to look a lot better in black. So Brad, again, doing another bit of work, which is getting a bit weird now.
So now that the ceiling is all nice and safe and secure, we can actually take the acro props back down because we know that the ceiling's safe.
So like Brad said, it's just a case of winding these down now because everything's secure upstairs. So we pulled the pins, dropped the acros down, and then it was time to start marking out for the trims that were going to go around the opening for the tank. So we got some black plastic trims because we thought that would match the ceiling best. And then we just put some 45-degree miters on the four corners using our chop saw. As you can see, everything is go, go, go. The tank has arrived and they're going to start sliding it into this frame that we've installed.
Hopefully we've done it good.
Hopefully we've done a good job and hopefully no one falls down the hole. So basically we've got to take our time with this because obviously we don't want to rush, it is glass. So the man himself, Ian, from Aquariums for Life, brought the tank all the way from the workshop to be installed. So they slid it in, it was super tight, and then he started setting up the filtration and the heater system. So as you can see, it's built into the tank like you see when it was being built, but it's all going to be nice and hidden. We got the carpet put back around the tank, so done that final trim, and it was time to fill it up. And let me tell you, this is very scary because it's a lot of water above your head. Once the tank was filled, our nerves all settled and we got the light installed, and then me and Brad went downstairs and decided that Artex ceiling just wasn't cutting it. That amazing tank surrounded by that horrid Artex. So with a lot of sanding and even more filler, we decided to smooth it all off. So this was a hard job, but I think in the end it was worth it because it just looks so much nicer. So Brad again whipped out the paintbrush and started painting the wall back to black. Once that was done, we could finally get those trims installed. Now that we've painted our ceiling for the second time, it's finally time to get our little plastic trims on. So little L trims. So we're going to be using Superfast from C-Tech. We're just going to put a few dots of glue along it and we're going to stick it to our ceiling. So while we were sticking these with the C-Tech, you can use an activator which basically sets the glue off immediately, but we decided just to hold it on there for about 10 seconds and let that glue set naturally to prevent causing any damage to that paint that we had just done on the ceiling. And it worked out an absolute treat. Now that the trims are on, we're going to put some plants all around the edges, get our chemicals in, and then in a couple of weeks we can look at putting some fish in. So let's get it dressed up. So you may be thinking, this isn't really difficult to stick some plants inside of a tank. But the problem is, all plants are designed for tanks that you look in through the side. Our tank has now been sat for 2 weeks and all the levels are now ready to put our first fish in. So we spoke to some people that know a lot more about fish than we do, and they have suggested we put some mollies in. So that's these guys here. So we're going to add them to the tank. It's going to take a little bit of time because you can't just dump them in, and then we'll show you that finished result. That's all the fish we're going to be adding to this tank for the first 4-week cycle, and then we can look at adding more later on down the line. But before we go and have a look at this final result, remember, like and subscribe so we can do mad stuff like this more in the future. Let's go and see what this looks like.